everybody, happy Thursday, Torch Thursday tutorial. Yes, we have already had 2 blue screens of death and an unplanned XSplit update this evening. So, you know, that's all fun times here at the Beading Dreams, but hopefully everyone is doing well. Lori, Kenneth, hi. So today's project is this. This is our shaped wide band ring, and this is an extremely simple ring project, like beyond easy. It is literally 2 solder joints. There is a solder joint at the back to actually, you know, get the ring together. Okay, camera, what's your problem? Alright, so there's a solder joint at the back, and there's a solder joint to attach the bezel cup onto the ring, and that is literally it. It's a totally wham bam thank you ma'am ring project. I love it because of that. So what are you going to need in order to do this? You are going to need some sheet metal, and I'm using 24 gauge sheet metal because you can cut that pretty easily with shears. Also, I think the XSplit update may have fixed the skipping problem, which I'm happy about that because I'm not like stopping in random places anymore. That was irony right there, what just happened. So anyway, 24 gauge sheet metal. You can use any sheet metal you want to for this. So sterling silver. Gold filled's a little tricky because you do have to put a lot of heat into this ring in order to make it work. So yeah, no, skipping problem definitely not fixed. It's fixed for like 5 seconds there. I feel like I need to put some kind of a diffuser over my ring light because these like rings, I mean, I could like line them up with my actual eyes and then I would just look creepy, but anyway. So yeah, you can use sterling silver. Gold filed's problematic because of all the heat that you have to put into this, but brass, bronze, copper, all of those are going to work fine. I'm using copper today because I don't want to have to deal with super pickle. As you may remember from past tutorials, if you're doing something in brass or bronze, when you solder onto it, you're going to wind up with a depletion gilded layer of copper on the surface that you need to chemically strip in order for that metal to get back to its native yellow color. So I don't want to have to do that on stream tonight, so copper is going to be my metal. I also have a stone. I've got a little peridot, and I have a bezel cup, and then I've got some easy sterling silver solder. So let's talk about making a template for this ring. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make a shape for the ring. It can be whatever shape you want. You know, this can be wider, this can be narrower, it can be rounded, you know, it can be completely different shape. But what I do when I'm making templates, because I'm not really great at drawing symmetrically, is I'll take a piece of cardstock, in which this case it's actually like an old Beading Dreams card, and I'll fold it in half, burnish it down really well. And then I'll go ahead and draw my shape. And you want to put the joint at the back of your ring. So this is the front of my ring. This is the top of my ring where my stone's going to be. So I want to, once again, I want to put the joint at the back. So that means that the front part of my ring is going to go on the fold. Okay, anybody who sews, this is familiar to you. So let's see. Do I want to do pointy again? I want to do, yeah.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
Alright, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to try making this kind of oval. So it's more like a traditional kind of cigar band style. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go with that, and it's tempting. Like, I always want to draw it wider at the center back just because that feels symmetrical to me, but don't do it. Do not do it. Keep it even. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to cut this out. Now, I have no doubt that there are ring templates that you can download on from the interwebs that are not hand-drawn and thus are probably way more symmetrical than what I just made. But all in all, it's not too bad. Just gonna do a little bit of D. Okay, so this is what I've got. So I'm pretty happy with this. It's kind of more like a wider sort of cigar band style. I think it's going to go well with my oval stone. I mean, I can just be nitpicky with this thing until the end of the stream, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. So now what I want to do is I need to size this. And actually for that, I need a tool that I do not have. So I will be right back while I get a caliper. So if we are going to go back to our ever popular Contenti ring blank size chart. So this is a really great resource that is on Contenti's site, and it basically tells you how many millimeters of metal you need to cut in length in order to make any particular size ring. So I'm going to go ahead and go for a size 7 ring. This is 24 gauge metal. The chart only goes down to 20 gauge, so we're just going to use the measurement for 20 gauge, because of course the thicker your metal is, the longer you need to cut it, because the inside diameter is going to get a little smaller than the outside diameter when you wrap it round. So 56.5 millimeters is what Contenti says my ring blank should be. Now what I would do if I were going to be using this for production, that is just okay. We're going to use this one. I'm not happy with this one. You go in the trash. So if you're going to be using this for production, what you actually could do is you could mark on your template. You could mark sizes. I'm just going to go with the size 7, so that was 56.5, I believe, or 2. So that's going to be right there. Of course, we want to keep it centered. So when you're measuring with a caliper, you're going from the inside of this to the inside of that. So I'm just going to mark there, and that's where we're going to end it, and that is for a size 7. So like I said, you could make, if this is a ring you're going to make a lot, you could make one template, make this extra long, and just mark all the sizes on there. Now I'm going to take this template design and I'm going to transfer it to my sheet metal. So I'm just going to do that very scientifically by tracing it with a Sharpie. So just hold it down nice and secure and just trace around it. So since we're tracing around the outside of the template, your final blank is going to be just a hair bigger in all dimensions than the template. And I'm going to cut it off there and there for my size 7. So that's going to go there and there. Okay, so that is my ring design on my metal. Now I'm going to cut it out with my metal shears. I always find it easier, and most of you guys know this about me, to kind of cut a rough shape out of my metal. And then cut my precise shape out of my metal. Alright, so there is my, excuse you. What did I do? I unplugged something and now my ring light's not working. Well, at least it's not reflecting in my glasses anymore. Alright, so that's my that's my sheet metal piece, and I'm going to use my shears to actually cut that out on the lines that I drew. Okay, it's like... Well, that's good. I'm glad you can still see me. When we get our streaming table rebuilt, which hopefully will happen fairly soon, I need to redo all of this nonsense, and I need to clearly label all of this rat's nest of cables, which reminds me, I totally stole Heather's power. She's probably had her phone plugged in all day and has been wondering why it hasn't been charging. And it's totally my fault. So anyway, back to this. I'm just being picky about my camera. All right, there we go. You can see me. I feel like you can see me a little bit better there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut this out. So the 24 gauge, as you can see, is pretty easy to cut with the shears. You could totally use 22 gauge for this if you wanted a heftier ring, or you could use 20 gauge as well. But if you get to 20 gauge, you're gonna have to start cutting it with a saw instead of shears. Sorry, that was not a very good cut that I made. Just shave that extra off. Okay, so I have now cut out my ring blank design. Okay, and I don't need to worry about the Sharpie because that is going to burn off when I solder. So now it's time to shape this violet and solder it. I'm looking for a file. Any kind of file. This is a bitty small needle file, but this will work. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my ring mandrel and my rawhide mallet, which I moved. Oh, that needs to get away. Which I moved so that I would stop dropping them on Heather's head, because for some reason she didn't love that. And so I'm going to take this, I'm just going to put it around my ring mandrel, and I'm going to bend it. And since this is a circle, it doesn't really matter where you put it. It's probably going to rotate around as you're bending. And then I'm going to use my rawhide to tap it down. Now, a lot of times, because of the hand-drawn template, you're going to get this, you're going to get this effect where you can pretty clearly see here that, well, okay, here. Now you can clearly see that one side is much, not much, but one side is significantly longer than the other. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to solder this together, and then I'm going to fix that, because it is so much easier to fix this problem once you actually have those two edges married into one, because then you can literally just take a file along each edge and just clean them up. It's really, really fast and easy. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to bend them so that I can get them to tension fit and see how much I have to file. And most traditional metalsmiths use this method of soldering where they'll take and they'll really flatten out the bottom of the ring shank, and that makes your soldering, makes your filing easier because you're not dealing with things coming together at an angle, they're coming straight in. And we can definitely reshape this and reform it after we solder it. So now I just need to true up these edges a little bit, because shears work like cutters where they're basically just pinching your metal down until it snaps. So we got to get rid of those burrs in order to solder this. So I'm just going to grab my file, and I want to use the flat side because this is a half round file, and I'm just going to ride it up that edge just until I've gotten rid of that burr from the cutting. And typically I would actually rest it on my finger like so. And typically I would also be holding it up in front of my face so I can see it instead of down under a camera so that you can see it. So we are going to have a sale tomorrow. We are going to be featuring some of the, not tomorrow, tomorrow's Friday. We're going to have a sale on Saturday. Saturdays there's going to be a sale featuring our Fabulous Findings Trunk Show. Tomorrow is going to be Zoom, so we get to see all your beautiful faces tomorrow evening. And then for the 5 of you who are listening, next week we are mostly going to be dark because my dad and my stepmom are in town, so I'm going to be spending some time with them. We will probably still be having a sale on Saturday night, but we will not be having any tutorials next week. Okay, so this is, I think, filed to the point where I can solder it. And I personally find it easier to like line up one side, like when it doesn't match like this, to line up one side so I only have one side to correct on. But you can, if you wanted to center that longer side on the shorter side, then you could do that as well. Dad is good, Sharon. Dad claims that he has 0 ill effects from his car being crushed like a tin can. So probably some of that is just stoic Midwestern man doing the stoic Midwestern man thing, but he claims that he is perfectly fine. His car, of course, is toast, though he did get a much more favorable settlement from the insurance company than he was expecting, so that's also good news. Ugh. He did, however, say that he thinks his sports car days are over, so I think he is going to travel into SUV land for actually the first time in my life. My dad has owned a sports car as long as I can remember. Like, and he said, like, and he used to have a Toyota Celica, which had the tiniest, like, little, it's a good thing I was a small child, because I would sit in the back seat of that thing, and it was like, it was so bitty small. And finally, you know, when I got old enough, he finally just gave up on the cars with the back seat, and he's driven a 2-seater for the past 10-15 years.
Wow.
But yeah, he's always had a sports car, so this is going to be weird. My dad's becoming a soccer mom. I mean, at least it's not a van, right? Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to solder this ring together, for which I'm going to need my flux and a brush with which to apply my flux. And I'm going to need a tweezers, not a knotting tweezers, but a soldering tweezers. And I could set this up in a third hand if I wanted to. I can also set it up like that. Yeah, you can just see it so much better this way. So we're gonna just kind of MacGyver it and see if we can do it this way so that you guys can see it a little bit better. So that's my seam that I'm trying to solder. So I'm gonna open up my flux, and of course it's completely dried out, so I'm gonna put some water in it. Alright, and then I'm going to paint my joint with my flux. So flux is just a chemical that helps my solder to flow by preventing oxidation on my metal. Because if your metal oxidizes, okay, like focus, thank you. If your metal oxidizes, that's going to be an oxide barrier that your solder can't flow through, and it's not going to work, is the upshot of that. Now let's take away everything else that my camera is trying to focus on. See if we can get it to focus on the actual thing. Yes, no, no, yes. Nobody cares about my hands, camera. No. I don't care about my hands. I care about the ring I'm about to solder. I did actually do my nails today, though, while I was waiting in the waiting room of the dentist office for my mom to get done with her tooth extraction. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So now I'm going to cut a piece of solder. And it doesn't need to be giant. Like, resist the urge to make a giant piece of solder, okay? I made a little piece that's, about 1 millimeter. And I can go ahead and drop that on my joint. And then I'm going to grab my torch, and I'm going to heat this whole thing up until that solder flows. And I'm gonna have my tweezers in my right hand in case I need them, my torch in my left hand. And I'm just gonna heat this. This is a big chunk of metal, okay? So you're gonna have to heat it a lot in order to get your solder to flow. Also, my solder moved, so I'm just gonna replace it on the joint. Once I think I've gotten my ring hot enough, I'm just gonna focus on that joint until the solder flows, and I want to make sure it goes across the joint. See how it's just kind of hanging out over there? That is not ideal. We need it to come all the way across this joint. So this is where sometimes, occasionally, taking a solder pick and helping to direct the solder can work, but it doesn't always work. Alright, that did not actually... Okay, so I am going to have to do it this way. Sorry, y'all. Unfortunately, even though you can actually cause solder to flow counter to gravity by using heat, gravity was not my friend in that situation that I was just in. So I'm going to do it this way. We're going to set that there, set the joint on there, and we're going to try and pull it up the joint. Alright, so now it's sitting on my solder, so we're going to see if that works any better. God, why do you do this to me when I'm on the internet? It's embarrassing.
Pretty rude.
It's extremely rude. Totes rude. So I'm having difficulties. I'm having difficulties because this ring is so big, and apparently my torch is not giving me quite the amount of heat that I need. So we're going to try a cheater trick. We're going to try reflexing, because also sometimes if the joint is dirty, that's going to inhibit the solder flow. So I'm going to try reflexing the joint. And this time I'm just going to go with my tried and true method of pick solder or pick transferring, and we're going to see if that works. There's so much solder on the back of this ring now, like it's definitely now a copper and silver ring, but we can file or sand that off once we get this stupid recalcitrant thing actually soldered together. Alright, so now I'm going to try and pick transfer on the inside, see if I can get it to go that way. The one method with placing your solder on the inside is even if it flows all over your ring, like mine did, it's on the inside, not the outside. So there's something to be said for that. Alright, so there's my joint. I think that's my joint. Oh baby, that's hot. There's my joint. We'll see it now. Come on, just go in the joint. Alright, it finally worked. Hallelujah. Alright, now we're going to put this baby over here to cool down because it is hot. And we're going to let this solder board cool down because it is hot. And I did not melt my camera, which is good. And yeah. So, in just a second, when my solder boards cool down just a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and sweat some solder onto the back of my bezel cup. And yes, I am using easy solder for both my bezel cup and my ring shank seam. And I feel okay with that because you saw how hard it was for me to flow that solder. So I really do not have any fears that I'm going to open up that seam while I'm trying to solder on my bezel cup. I just don't see that happening. Now watch me be proved wrong live on the internet. It's been a while since we've had an episode of Allison Screws Up on the Internet. I feel like we're probably due. But maybe not tonight. But I feel like one is going to be coming soon.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I've got my bezel cup right there, so I'm just going to go ahead and flux the back of that and cut a piece of solder and drop it on there. And I'm just going to heat till that solder flattens out and sweats onto the back of that. And this process should be much easier and faster because this is a much smaller piece of metal. The trick when you're sweating solder onto bezel cups is, you know, don't melt the bezel cup while you're trying to sweat the solder. Whereas I don't think there's any way in the world I could have melted that ring. Since it didn't want to stay on there, I'm just going to transfer it over and wham bam, there you go. Super easy. For this next part, I am going to use... Alright, I am going to use a third hand, but first I'm going to go ahead and grab my ring mandrel again and my rawhide mallet, and I'm going to re-round this because I made it into that kind of D shape in order to solder it. So I'm just going to push it down on my mandrel as far down as it'll go, and I'm just going to tap it. And then I'm going to flip it over and tap it again. And the reason that we want to do this on both sides is because the mandrel is a cone shape, not a cylinder. So if you don't flip it, you're going to wind up with a cone-shaped ring. Now, if I wanted to, at this point in time, I could texture it a little bit. I also could have textured it before I bent it. So you can use stamps, you can hammer. There's a lot of different, you know, cool ways that you can texture this ring. It is a little bit small, so I'm kind of feeling like maybe a light hammer texture might be fun. Which means I'm just going to grab my chasing hammer and I'm just going to brace my mandrel against my work surface, and I'm just going to give it a light hammer. And if I make sure to get the edges, that's going to help with finishing them and making them feel more smooth, and it's going to be less work for you with steel wool and sandpaper. There's all that solder. We'll file that off in a minute. Okay, so there's my hammer textured ring. Now while it's on the mandrel, because it's going to be way easier for me to do that, I think I'm going to grab a sanding disc. I'm just going to sand off that extra solder. Ah! Mouse down! Mouse down!
Anything but the mouse.
Yeah, right? Okay, so I'm just going to take this and just get rid of that solder that flowed all over the band of my ring. Okay, don't sand your mandrel. Okay, let's see, pretty easy. It's not focusing on anything. That's great. That's not great. That's awful. Really, camera? What is your problem? Please, God, tell me I didn't mount the camera. Okay, well, I'm going to sand this and then I'm going to figure out what the heck is going on with my camera, because this is not good. I know, right? Where are the cats when you need them to find the mouse? Okay, yay, it focused. Hallelujah. Okay, so I just used the sanding disc to bring down that edge where it wasn't matching, so that now it matches. Okay, so now put this away. I am going to go ahead and grab that mouse off the floor. And now we're going to go ahead and just add the stone. Or add the setting for the stone, and then we're going to add the stone after that. So I am going to use a third hand for this, just to hold my ring, because I want to solder my stone onto the top of it. And it's round now, so it's rolly. That's a technical term, by the way, rolly. So I'm just going to set that up with the top of the ring, the center top facing upwards, and I feel like it just wants to focus on the ruler tape. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to flex that. Flex the top of the ring. Take your bezel cup that has a solder sweat onto it. Place that where you want it to go. It is going to move around, so you do want to make sure that you have a solder pick or tweezers handy to help keep it in position. And we're just going to go ahead and the solder pick instead. I'm going to go ahead and heat this until that solder flows and bonds everything together, and hopefully it doesn't slide too far off center. Your third hand is a big heat sink, so don't be alarmed if this takes a while. You got a big piece of metal attached to a big heat sink. Alright, and you'll know when your solder's slow because you'll see it kind of settle in, like it just did. I don't know if the camera was focused well enough, but it kind of settles down, and then if you kind of try and poke at it, it doesn't come off, then you know you did a good job. Don't poke at it too hard, because if it's only partially soldered on, it can come flying off, and at this point, once again, it is very hot, so be careful. Alright, so just going to give that a minute to cool. Now, what I would normally do as far as finishing this is I would just throw it in the tumbler, and that'll make it nice and shiny. If you tumble, you can skip the intermediary steps of pickling and steel wool. So I'm going to go ahead and set my stone. I picked a peridot because it can go in the tumbler. And then I will have a finished ring to show you all on Zoom tomorrow night. And also, by the way, I still haven't finished this. I will finish this on Zoom tomorrow night and show you as well. Like, it tumbled, but I haven't set the stone in it. So I haven't forgotten to post it on Discord. I just haven't actually done it yet. Okay, so I think everything's soldered together, so I can put my soldering stuff away. And I'm actually going to use a ring mandrel, or my ring stick, to help me set this baby, because it's a little too wide for a ring clamp. Not going to go well on a ring clamp. To set my stone, I'm going to use a prong pusher. Pardon me while I attempt to sort of kind of neaten up my workspace without bashing my cameras. Okay, so I'm going to use my ring stick to just help brace this, and I'm going to put that on there. Still a little warm, but not too bad. And I don't really need my bench block at this point. I'm going to grab my peridot. I already tested this to see if it fits, so I'm going to go ahead and drop it in there. If you are at all unsure of whether or not your stone is going to fit, do a test with dental floss first. And also, since this stone is transparent, I do not want to leave the inside of my bezel cup looking black and gross like that. So what I need is a polishing point. So they make these cool little pointy bits that you can use to polish. And so Kenneth wants to know, what is the hardness threshold of stones you can put in the tumbler? I am never comfortable with anything less than a 7 in the tumbler. And then you also, like with corundums and things, even though they're like a 9 or an 8, and I think they're a 9, there's a lot of treatments and dyes that are used that the tumbler can destroy. So I will only put stones in the tumbler if I know that they're untreated and I know that they're hard enough to withstand the tumbler. But the rule of thumb is if you care about it, if it's a valuable stone, don't put it in the tumbler, because there's always a chance, no matter what it is, that it won't survive. Alright, so I'm just gonna go ahead and clean out the inside of this as best I can. Looking much nicer. Okay, that should be good. And I'm just gonna grab a little bit of alcohol on some sort of, I can use this. Just gonna put a little bit of alcohol on this and just kind of clean out some of that gunk. If I had a Q-tip handy, I would be using that, but I don't, so we're improvising, because that's what we do on the Beading Dream Stream. Okay, so now that is alright, now that's nice and shiny and cleaned out, so that my peridot is not going to look like crap. Now, interesting thing to note, if you're using something like an opal, which by the way, you should never put an opal in the tumbler, but if you're using something like an opal, the opal oftentimes will actually shine more attractively if the inside of your bezel, if it's a white opal. A lot of times you'll get more flash and shine off of it if the inside of your bezel is actually black. And then of course if you've got an opaque stone, it doesn't matter because you can't see the back of your bezel. Okay, so there we go. That's a little, okay, that's a little tall. Like, I don't know if you can see, but see how deep that's sitting in that bezel? I don't like that, because that's going to result in my stone being really covered a lot by my bezel. So I'm going to go back to my sanding disc real quick, and I'm going to just take that down. And ideally you want to take it down evenly. You don't want to, you know, make your bezel crooked, but I'm just going to take that and I want it just flat. I'm just trying to take it down the height of it. Now, obviously I still need this to be tall enough to set my stone, so everyone cross your fingers that it didn't take off too much. Yeah, that's much better. Like, I don't know if you can see the difference on camera, but now the stone's not being engulfed by the bezel. There's still enough metal there that I'll be able to roll it over and set the stone nice and securely, but it's not going to be hidden in there, because of course, you know, the stone is the star. The bezel is not the star. The bezel is just the vehicle for setting the stone into a wearable piece of jewelry. Okay, so now I'm just going to take my prong pusher and I'm going to do my 4 corners first. So remember, the motion is in and down. So see how that pressed that bezel up against the side of the stone. Now flip it around, do the same on the other side. In and down, and then bottom and top. And at this point you probably have something that looks extremely wonky. fun factoid that I have shared in the past is back when I was a baby smith, I never actually rolled my bezels over. I would just glue my stones into my bezel cups because I was too scared. I always got scared at this part of the process, and when it looks so bad, it looks terrible, I don't know what to do. And the answer is keep going. Okay, so now that I've got these 4 corners squished in, I'm just gonna do the 4 corners that are sticking out, and then I'm just gonna start going around and around the bezel. And I didn't realize at that point in my career how much work it actually takes to properly roll a bezel over. I was expecting it to be much less labor intensive than it actually is, so I would always stop too soon if my bezels never looked neat. Okay, so now we're just going to go around and around and around we go. So for those of you who don't necessarily have the hand strength to do this with a pusher, you also can do, it's called hammer setting, which is a lot more dangerous because it's a lot more likely you're going to crack your stone. But you can actually use a hammer to smooth that bezel over, a hammer and a punch like this. However, you need a special kind of vise, which I don't own, so I just do it the quick and dirty way. If anyone wants to buy me a ball vise, I will show y'all how to hammer set. And by the way, ball vise, not the same as a ball gag, so just saying. Totally different purposes.
Yes. Okay.
Alright, and then if you want to take a burnisher to that just to smooth it down. And that's just used to kind of smooth out if you have any little nicks in the metal from your pusher. And you can use the, don't stab yourself like I just did, that hurt. Then you can use the burnisher to smooth it all down. Because really, when you think about it, metal is, you think about metal as being fairly inflexible, but it really is more flexible than you think it is. So if it's got nicks and scars in it, you can literally smush them away with something like a burnisher. And that's it. That is it. That is the shaped wideband ring, y'all. I mean, these tools would that be it? And on that note, and if you're ridiculous, oh, please don't ever change. Don't ever leave us. We would be so sad. So yeah, so that's your shaped wideband ring. So incredibly simple soldering project, really, for the results that you get. And so I'm gonna throw this in the tumbler. It's gonna tumble overnight. Like I said, I'll have it to show you guys on Zoom tomorrow. I like the hammer texture. Of course, now I made this one a little bit too small for me. I'm really bad at making rings for myself because I usually just pick a random size and it's usually not my own size. But yeah, so I'm going to throw that in the tumbler. It should be nice and shiny by tomorrow. I'll show you all on Zoom. Don't forget we have Zoom tomorrow night from 6 to 8. If you don't have the credentials for that Zoom already and you would like them, please email us, beadingdreamsdallas@gmail.com. Heather and I will try and shoot out that Zoom email to you all before we leave this evening. But yeah, that's it. That's our soldering tutorial for tonight. So once again, we are going to be Zoom tomorrow. We're going to be sale on Saturday. We're going to be mostly dark next week, except for sale on Saturday night, assuming that I can bribe Heather into doing that without me. So everyone have a great night. Thank you for your patience with me getting on late. I swear, if it's not one thing, it's another, but we will see y'all back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dreams, Saturday at 6:30 p.m. with a findings and other merchandise live sale. Everyone have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye!